Frequency. Good evening. Let me just check who's that so I can update. I can update the attendance. That was getting lost. Sorry, Floyd. Welcome, Floyd.
Hello, thank you.
All right. Uh, that's the only one I think. Mela. So frequencies, wavelengths, amplitude, transversal waves, rarefactions, compressions, longitudinal waves. We'll talk a bit about
This is the new
timbre.
Tesla Model S
Timbre.
Plaid, and it's a
in
little bit
French,
like
so
the
it
Millennium
sounds strange.
Falcon because it
Some
might
say
not
it's
look
timber, and timber is used in forests when there's a tree falling. It's timbre. It's timbre. Harmonics. We'll speak about harmonics a bit. This is how I learned music from the physics side, basically. We will use a bit, at least I will use a bit Audacity just to show you what it can do, so to get you a bit more interested on the subject, on the software itself. Yes, we'll look at a couple of instruments as well. You might hear me singing. Apologies from now if I if I مش tone now. This tone, if I sing off key for a bit. Um, what's at the end? What's at the end after those? Harmonics, Eva. Yes, of course. The shape of sound. The shape of sound. Um, the shape along time of sound, actually. Any of you who have any knowledge of microphones or speakers or instruments will have fun, I hope. And feel free to correct me, because of course I don't have, exposure to all the instruments everywhere. I had my fair share, but yeah, it's always nice to get new stuff. I mean, I had never discovered vuvuzelas before World Cup of Africa, so there's always someone learning, some learning to be done. Okay, so we can start practically. So we're looking here at this bottom level today, okay? The physical nature of audio, which is of course also what you are hearing right now, um, from my voice coming out to your speakers or headphone speakers, whatever. But of course, the voice coming out of my mouth is in itself interesting. They're basically vocal cords, but also shaped by throat, vocal cavity, teeth placement. All right, Freddie Mercury apparently had a nice range of voice, also because of his teeth. Um, uh, take advantage of your differences, basically. Um, yeah. So any sound source, okay, is about vibration, and then that vibration gets modulated by the vessel, by the medium through which it is being delivered. We have compression going along between my voice and what you are hearing, so certain things also get changed a bit. But here today we'll focus more on the source of the sound. We'll talk about the reception of the sound, possibly in the second half of the lecture, in an hour's time. Um, yeah, so GDD can look a bit at these chapters if they want to. But yes, let's go back to Form 3 or Form. I think it was Form 3 or Form 4, at least in my days when we covered waves. And of course, sound is a progression of energy, a progression of movement of molecules across space. Those molecules can be air, as in this case, they can be water, they cannot be vacuum. Okay, there's no sound in space because there are no molecules to carry forward the energy emanating from it. So yes, once again, Star Wars fans, those laser beams shooting would not be audible. But I did read that there was a kind of a justification for these sounds that could be heard. The justification was that the spaceships that they had, uh, they were calculating where the laser beam was coming from, and they made the sound within the cockpit for the pilot to be aware from where the sound is coming. As far stretched as far stretched as possible, but yes, okay, in science fiction everything is possible, but it was a bit of retro continuity trying to explain a mistake in the past, of how that could be possible. But yes, we need a medium in order to deliver the sound. The sound is different from light waves. So sound waves and light waves are different. That's why we cannot see sound and we cannot hear light unless we are some superhuman. Because the shape, the physics of the energy is different. In the case of sound, it is a forward progression of energy. So the what we're going to call compressions and rarefactions are in the direction of travel. Okay, it's a forward push like a queue of people or dominoes, you're pulling them forward. But unlike dominoes, they don't fall, they push back sort of against the energy, and there's this continual forward and backward movement. So when there's this forward movement, so there's less space between a molecule and the next one, that's when we have decompression. And when they go back further away from the molecule in front of them, that's where we get the rarefaction. Rarefaction, basically, the molecules are less dense, so they are rarer within that space. However, this representation is not very meaningful to us, and so we prefer to represent it as a transverse wave, where the magnitude of the compression is not depicted along the direction of travel, but perpendicularly. So we end up showing sound waves, which are actually longitudinal waves, so in the direction of travel, we tend to show them as transverse waves, as movement which is perpendicular to the direction of travel. It is not so physically, but it helps us to understand it better. So we talk about these sound waves in terms of crests, which are these hilltops, and troughs, the valleys underneath, which for a full sound, so full amplitude, would go from 0 to 1, back to 0 to -1, and back to 0. That whole sequence, which comprises of three zeros, okay, 1, 2, and 3, that's something we call a cycle, and the amount of time it takes to go from the start to the end of the cycle, we call that the wavelength, the length of the wave in terms of time. How much it moves away from rest, okay, from no sound, that we call the amplitude, which, as I said, goes from 1 to -1 or -1 to 1. And from the wavelength, we can determine the frequency. The frequency being how many wavelengths fit in 1 second. The lower the frequency, the bigger the wavelength, the more time it takes for the molecule to move back and forth. So there isn't that sudden movement. Lower frequencies tend to have um, uh, a lower pitch, okay, so low, okay, down there, whereas higher frequencies tend to have a higher pitch. Um, Warning, a high pitch sound is coming. You have 3 seconds to lower your volume if you need to. 3, 2, 1. Process. Okay, a whistle could be an example of a high pitch. Of course, you can also whistle low. Um, I can do a falsetto, la, which can give you that higher pitch. That would be a higher frequency, therefore the wavelength would be lower. And I can show you that. Let me mute these here. We can see that in this one, if I do the la, la, apart from the funny sounds I'm making, and apart from the amplitude, okay, you can see a kind of a quite a fast frequency here. If I keep the same level of um, zoom, you can see that the wavelength is barely visible, apologies, but also as a trough, difference between the peak and the trough is quite farther away from each other compared to this one here, where they are closer. The fact is that the lower frequencies have less power, to be fair. But what I can do, and I should have done in the first place, is to generate a tone with a low frequency, say 55, which is this one here, with quite a good amplitude there. Apologies, I chose the wrong shape. Let me just bring that better. So generate tone, I wanted a sine wave of 55 hertz. And then here I want to generate a tone of say 220 hertz. 220 hertz from there. And if we zoom in, okay, here you can see, let's do this. As you can see a particular wavelength here, and if I go to the 220, okay, the wavelength is shorter. The wavelength is shorter. It would have been better, now you think about it. If
Can I
I,
stop you quickly? Sorry.
sure.
My stream quality seems to be like very low. It looks like 144p. I'm not sure if it's from your end or my end. Like, all I can see is pixels.
The same
Okay.
from mine as well.
Okay, I will take a screenshot. I will take a screenshot and paste it in the channel so that you get the proper look for this one.
Okay.
Apologies for that. Tracks, add new mono. Go here, generate tone, 220 at 0.8. Okay, Mela. Let me just shorten a bit these. And increase these on here. And zoom in a bit. Okay. Mela, let me take the screenshots. Mela, I want a full cycle. So basically like this. So if we look at the text channel where I'm posting the picture, oops, and you have to press enter, sorry. Well, at the top we have one cycle of the 55 hertz sound. That is 55 wavelengths in 1 second. The bottom one is the 220 hertz signal. So we have 220 wavelengths in 1 second. As you can see, within one wavelength at the top, we can fit in 4 wavelengths from the bottom. And that makes sense because 220 is 4 times the 55. Okay, so we can fit in as many as 4 wavelengths. For each one wavelength we can fit into a 55 hertz. So that's what we mean when we're saying 55, 110, 120. It's how many wavelengths we can fit in. Now, the sound that these create, probably the 55 will not be so audible. I'm turning on the volume as much as I can. Not here, on the speakers. Okay, and I'm going to play the 55 hertz only. My mic is this one, so let me play that. Okay, that was the 55 hertz sound. Very low. I'm not sure if you managed to hear something from that, but
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah,
good,
yeah,
good,
it's
good.
okay.
Okay. Issa, the the issue will come now with hearing the 220 because it's going to be quite loud. Mela, let me lower a bit the sound here. Let me do it from my end first. Okay, not that bad. Actually, horejtejtu l-ħalla għamilt, yes, I'll listen. So the 220 would be, whereas the other one was, and if we hear them together, so both, I think, I hope these are muted. No, this is not muted. Mute yourself, thank you. And you? Muted. Okay, so playing these two together. They don't sound too bad together. Okay, let's say it again. And that is because the ratio between them is an integer. Because 220 is an integer multiple of 55. It's 55 times 4. If I had to generate another one, which is not an integer multiple, for example, 200 hertz instead of 220, okay, and I play that with the 55. Let's see. Okay, it sounds quite strange, quasi. It's not a stable sound. Yes.
Would it be fair to say that you created reverb in the process by not using a multiple of 55? Sounds like it's reverbing to me.
Okay.
Maybe a lingering sound, like a linger between the two.
It's actually a beating. It's actually a beating, it's called, when you have frequencies which are close together. And that is because, let's hear it with the 220. Okay, so we have the 200 and the 220 playing together. Okay, there's almost that vibrating sound between the two, which is a result of that 20 hertz difference between them.
Exactly. So you emphasize the difference. You emphasize the beating by increasing the difference between the multiples.
Ecco, infatti, interesting fact, if we create a new mono track and I create a tone of 219, okay, which is 1 hertz away from 220, we'll hear something like this. All right, there's this 1 second change in volume. Okay, it's a change in volume of a seemingly singular sound. Notice that change in volume over 1 second. So by over 1 second, I mean that you actually get a wave change in volume. So it goes high, low, and back to high again. Let's say it again. Issa, that is something that's happening not on the speaker, okay, but it's happening in your perception. Okay, your ear is listening to 200 from one, 219 from the other, and it's trying to make sense out of it. And it creates this beating, this change in volume as a result of this discrepancy. However, I digress. My intention was why they sounded nice together. Why the 220 sounded nice with the you unmute this one, so okay. Why it sounded nice with the 55. Nice as in it sounds like a new sound rather than a distorted sound, and that is because of it being an integer multiple. That is the takeaway from this part. It's an integer multiple. Issa, why are these important? Mela, let me tell you what my kids were doing in this study just before the lesson. Mela, this is the first recording, and I want you to guess what instrument was used to make this sound. Sorry, not that one. Let me mute them. Mute and mute. So this one. Any guesses?
Sounds like a cello.
Violin.
Cello, violin. Okay, it's a string instrument. Good enough. What are you seeing? Let me see what you're seeing. You're seeing this. Okay, so there you go. That was this one. Okay, the violin. Good. It's good guesses as well on the chat. The second one coming here. Taking bets.
Flute.
Flute.
Peruvian flute.
Okay. Still a violin. Okay.
No,
Okay.
it's a wind instrument for sure because there were segments in between where you could hear the person breathing in that short breath before.
That's right. It was this part here. Yes. And that was my daughter playing the flute, which I don't have it here because she's still practicing. It was before her practice. But I have. Well, I don't think you can see this because it's green. Because of the green screen, you can't see. But yeah, a flute or a recorder in this case, a recorder, which is a woodwind. Yes, so it uses breath to play. So yes, it's a flute. It's a sideway flute. Yes, not a clarinet. Well done. Now, how did you recognize it? How did you recognize it? If we look at its shape, right? At its shape here, it's you can't see that. Sorry. Let me paste this in the chat. So this is the flute shape, and the violin, not as much present. Violin. Well, basically the flute has a larger volume, so it's quite hard to distinguish at this level between them, right? But you can see here the flute has a higher frequency pitch almost. But then maybe if we focus on this part, yeah, that's maybe a bit better. So let's do this. There, so violin top, flute bottom. But maybe a better view, because what we're seeing here is what? Is the amplitude across time. Okay, is the amplitude, the change in amplitude across time, which is a bit hard for us to notice. Here, in fact, you can see a bit of a tremolo. Okay, the volume is going up and down quickly. We can hear that. Okay, and I did not ask her to do that. You did it automatically. And in the violin here, we can see this kind of profile here. Okay, you can see this quick rise, goes down, and then is a bit now stable, and then goes off. Let's hear that. Okay, that will become important a bit later on. But for now, I want to change the view. I want to start with the flute, and instead of a waveform, I want to change over to a spectrogram view. What does a spectrogram show us? So what the spectrogram shows us is a long time, still a long time. On the y-axis, let me take a screenshot so you can see.
Sir,
Yes, yes.
għall-lista jkun, is there a way how we can increase the quality of the stream? Because it's
Mela.
just a blur, to be honest.
Mela tiegħi hija 35 ma 26 and there's no loss here. So it doesn't seem to be from here. Let me check something. Let me turn off the video and turn on screen share. See if that gets you any better. Can you connect to the screen share and tell me if that's any better?
Ija, tara 720 OP issa.
Okay. 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 Well, I'll give you a break from my face and you can focus on the view there. Particularly this one over here. Mela. So here we're looking at the flute. Let me just lower this down. We're looking at the flute part. Along the x-axis, we still have time. So time is moving forward, going in this direction, time. On the y-axis, we have the frequency. So we have frequency on the y, not amplitude now, but the frequency. And the color is how present, how loud is that particular frequency. And if I zoom in a bit, you can see that we have this band frequency, this frequency here around 400, okay, which is the brightest part there. But then, and it is stereo, that's why it's double. Let me just lower this a bit. If I zoom out a bit, okay, the 400, then I have another red part, so the purple, blue, that's silent, not present a lot. Red, yellow, white is the most present, okay? So I have the 400, but then I also have the 800, and of course 800 is twice 400. And then I have 1200, which is 3 times the 400. And if I zoom out a bit more, I have the 1600, the 2000, and the 24,000. So you can see that alongside the 400 hertz, which was the note that was trying to be played, we also get the integer multiples of that frequency. Okay, of the frequency. Now, those are called harmonics. Harmonics. Okay, they are the integer multiples of the base frequency. And these harmonics together form the timbre, the voice of the instrument. It is shaped by the instrument's structure, by the instrument's body. Okay, so the flute being a straight circular body, the material, okay, it's metal. The way that the sound is produced, it is the vibration of the air within the instrument. Okay, that gives it this particular voice, which is manifested with these harmonics, which actually go up. So we have the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and barely the seventh. In fact, if we move on to the next note, okay, this one here, we see that the shift upwards of the note is reflected in the shift upwards of the harmonics as well. If I zoom in a bit there, that frequency is now something like for 50. Okay, so then you have 900, and then we should have 1350, and then we should have 18. Okay, again, they are the integer multiples of that base frequency. That was for the flute. That was for the flute. Let me see what happened. Okay. Of course, you can see that these lines continue up there, but they are very faint. They are very faint. And that goes on all along the time, except when she took a breath for the next note. And here is where we saw that tremolo, that change in volume. In fact, it is white, red, white, yellowish. Let's go down there. Okay, yellowish. So yellow, a bit less, at least not a bit less in this main one, okay, but the ones above are more prominent in their difference between the louder parts and the less loud parts. Okay, and that was the tremolo part of it. And that goes on until the end. Yes?
So, does resonance come into play here, especially when you have a frequency coming at 400, for example, and then you have its multiples of it? Would that be produced through resonance as well, through from the body and the string of the instrument, or whatever the composition of the instrument is?
Mela, resonance usually happens at a specific frequency. So having this happening across different frequencies would indicate that it is not resonance. For example, your inner ear, that's your ear canal, okay, your ear canal, so the space between the outer ear and your eardrum, that resonates between 3000 and 4000 hertz, which unfortunately is the frequency at which flares burn, Sofarelli, the feast flares. That's why when there's a flare being lit in a feast, you can't stand it, okay? And if you close your ears, it literally becomes bearable, because what's happening is you are stopping the frequency of that sound from resonating within your ear canal. So it's that would be the kind of resonance, okay, where the amplitude of the sound becomes big because the body itself agitates itself at the same frequency.
Okay.
So it's not a matter of resonance; it is a matter of strange how to say how the structure of the body of the instrument actually creates this element. To understand more how this happens, okay, I'm going to record a whistle. So bear with me as I record a whistle. So you mono track, okay, go forward. Will it let me record like this? I guess. So and I zoom in a bit. Lower a bit your sounds so you don't hear the whistle too much, but I'll do it here. Let me check. Mic check. Okay, here's coming. And look what happens here. Okay, compare the recording of the whistle with the recording of the flute, which they are both wind based. But in the case of the whistle, we only have a single bright yellow harmonic, not harmonic, frequency, all right, which was quite high pitch. Nice one, 2K there, and very little, if any, harmonics. Okay, there's one up here, but I mean, compared to these where we had quite a few yellows there, okay, it's just a red line, exactly twice as much above, all right, but nothing else. It's negligible, not like these. So a whistle, because the whistle is coming not from my vocal cords and through the mouth, but it's just coming out of the lips. Okay, there is no harmonics, no timbre around it. Let's
Okay,
go.
thank you, sir.
You're welcome. Let's go to the other extreme. Let's look now at the violin. Let's look at the violin. Let's see the spectrum for the violin. Boof. Okay, and compare that with the flute underneath it. Let's give them equal space. Okay, so for the flute, the frequency, and am I zoomed in the same? Not really. Okay, so don't cheat. Well, let's zoom out a bit. Something like that. So if you look at the flute, it has like one, two, we have counted six, okay, six harmonics. For the violin, we see reds, quite a few red lines. Okay, so if I zoom in for this one, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, a bit of a 13 there. So the violin has more harmonics being heard than a flute. So a flute is a cleaner sound, whereas a violin is a richer sound. It has its timbre is richer because it has more harmonics that can be heard. And maybe if you go a bit further down, okay, again we can see that it's consistently um, uh, much more present than the flute across all these levels. So while both instruments tried to play the same note, in fact my daughter came and asked her brother, "What notes did you play?" So I played the same notes. I didn't ask her to, but she did. So while they're playing the same notes, they're trying. Okay, let's see if I solo and unmute this one. Nice, because you turned off the sound. Okay. Yeah, they are basically the same sound there. Let me just remove this one to make sure. So this one is playing, and the flute is playing. Okay, if we hear them both, they're playing the same note, the same frequency, but because they used different instruments, they have different timbre. They have different harmonics. Let's make sure. Different harmonics, it doesn't mean that they don't have harmonics. I mean, harmonics are all times 2, times 3, times 4, times 5. It's how loud are those harmonics being played. In fact, the next slide attempts to show that. So in the flute, here I'm showing along the bottom, okay, the harmonics. So the bass frequency, the 400 hertz, the second harmonic times 2, 800 hertz, 1200 hertz, 1600 hertz, 2000 hertz, and so forth, and likewise for the violin. Okay, for the flute, the two strongest harmonics are usually, I mean, this is a specific flute we listen to, but on average, okay, the flute, the strongest frequencies are the fundamental frequency and the twice the frequency, the first harmonic. So it gives us the first two, which, you know, looking here, it's there. Okay, it's there. Maybe the quality of the instrument, or maybe the material, etc. In the violin, okay, we see that we have a strong fundamental frequency. We don't have, like the flute, as strong another harmonic, but the other harmonics, unlike the ones for the flute where they are quite subdued, okay, for the violin they are quite present, okay, up all the way to the seventh and possibly the eighth, which we've seen it here, is actually quite true, quite realistic. So the timbre is what determines the voice of the instrument. The timbre is our perception, okay? What we call the voice is our perception, composed of our sensing all these harmonics, all these integer multiple of that bass frequency that we hear. And of course, that timbre changes according to the tone, changes according to the note, to the frequency being played. Okay, so when we went upwards with the over here. When we went upwards with the frequency, all the harmonics moved along with it. They are basically times 2, times 3, times 4. If you change the base number, it will increase. It will increase accordingly. And that voice, okay, is something that would be used, for example, in voice recognition software. Okay, not speech recognition. Speech recognition doesn't care about who's talking. It cares more about what words are being said. Okay, voice recognition, it doesn't care what you're saying. It cares of who is saying it. And in fact, if you change your voice, maybe you're a bit sick, okay, it wouldn't recognize you. As it happened to me quite a few years ago when I called my girlfriend, now the wife. I called home. Of course, she was at her mother's home. And the voice answered, and it sounded like my girlfriend sick. And I'm like, oh, poor boo, you're sick, honey. Wait, I get you. I get you my daughter. It was the mother-in-law who was sick, and it sounded like it was my girlfriend who was sick. I'm like, oops, sorry, I mistook the voice because it was different, right? So probably
Hopefully it wasn't taken too harshly.
but by the girlfriend, not by the mother. We got married, so I don't think it mattered.
When they say that you married the family.
Oh, that's right, that's right, that's right. Issa, how is this important to us? It's important to us because when we are choosing the sound effect, when we are choosing the speech, when we are choosing the music, it's not just the melody, but it's also the instrument that has an influence on the perception of that sound. If I have a frail looking character, okay, and I give them this voluminous voice, okay, that doesn't match. Okay, if I have um, a female character and she has a male-like voice, which can happen, especially if that person smokes. I remember a friend of mine, a friend of ours, she got called by someone wanted to sell something, and the mother answered the phone. And the person on the phone said, "Can I speak to the missus, please?" I am the missus. They expected a gentler voice, a more, but she has quite a low voice. This particular woman, also because she used to smoke, so that affects as well. So yes, imagine, for example, Lord of the Rings. Okay, when they chose the music for the different locations, okay, the music for the Shire was, with flutes, with nice, um, um, not very full harmonics, okay, very clean, to reflect the kind of instruments that these hobbits would use in the Shire. Whereas when we went in Mordor, okay, the background was with percussion instruments, lots of metal, lots of brass, to reflect um, the less the less nice people that were there. Um, it happened, for example, as well with Darth Vader. For example, okay, Darth Vader, the actor behind the mask, his voice was not was not what they imagined Darth Vader to be. Okay, he didn't have that commanding voice, so they actually had to get a voice actor to do the voice for Darth Vader, which was fine because you couldn't see his lips moving, so there was no lip syncing issues. But yes, they had to get someone else to do the voice because now you have the physique of Darth Vader, but you don't sound like Darth Vader. But what does he sound like? We don't know because it doesn't exist, but definitely not your voice. So they had to get someone who was actually a radio show host, who had this nice grainy voice on radio, and then they got him to do that. So yeah, your choice of
Can I step
yes,
for a second? I still don't get how you get different harmonics though. I'm pretty sure now it has to do with the instrument you're using, but
yes,
I'm still not sure how harmonics are created.
Could it be that, for example, that the violin, because that's what I was going to ask, maybe because it has loose strings and
yes.
the
Good question. Yeah,
vibrating.
yes. Good point. That's something I missed explaining. Apologies.
Okay.
So. Let me switch to. I want to go where I can see myself, so I can see what you're seeing.
And the bow, probably the bow scratching on the strings that would make frequencies, I guess.
Eva, well, let me do this a bit. So I'll switch back to video so I can show you a bit what's going on. Um, so well, this is not visible, but the flute. Imagine that this is a flute. Okay, it's a recorder actually. Um, has a very solid body. Okay, it's of metal or hard plastic. Okay,
Yep.
so it's very strong against vibrations. Okay. On the other hand, the violin, which of course can be seen, the violin itself has, yes, it depends on the strings and the tension on the strings. Okay. The strings which are tensed, they're held by one end here. We can do some micro adjustments of the tension. It's for tuning actually. And at the top, of course, we have the pins with the pegs, which are used to do the coarse tuning, and then you get the fine tuning with the ones here. So basically, what the sound is coming out of strings. Again, it's not a plucking of the string, but we have horsehair taut as in tight,
Yep.
tense,
Yep.
tension, T-A-U-T, taut on a bow. In fact, this is something which, again, you unscrew to make it less taut, okay, but wouldn't sound nice, so you have to tighten it a bit. And once it's tight, basically the sound is made by um, pulling the hairs across the bow. So you have a vibration of the string, and you also have the coarse surface of the hairs, which are going across this. Then you have the amplification. Okay, and the amplification is coming through the violin's body. Okay, which is going in and out of these S-shaped holes here. And the wood itself, although hard, still has this kind of vibration quality. Okay, it's still, I mean, if you put your
So
finger on it
it's more
and
malleable than the flute, essentially. What you're
yes,
saying.
yes, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. Um, so that gives all these extra frequencies on top of on top of the sound that you're making, that's coming out of the strings. Um, And then again, you have different violin shapes that will give different voices. A lot of people mention the Stradivarius, okay, which seems to have been on sale for quite a few millions. But actually, when you listen to it, I mean, it's not me saying it, it doesn't sound so nice. It's the quality of the wood that was used, it's the shape that was used. In Marta Scala, we have an actual violin maker. Okay, he builds the violins. He was on TV quite a few months ago, and of course, so the way it's composed, even the glue that's used for it, okay, it all influences the resulting sound that's coming out of the instrument. Um, so yeah, it's how the sound is made. Okay, so the flute you have, you're blowing, so it's like a whistle, but then it's passing through an instrument. Here in this case, it's friction. Okay, it's caused by friction between the bow and the strings, and the shape of the instrument, the material of the instrument. For example, some of you said maybe a cello, okay, or a cello, violoncello. In Italian, it's cello, so it should be cello, which is a bigger instrument. So of course, the wavelengths, the lower wavelengths, get a bit more space where they can be amplified. Um, uh, Likewise, the flute, there's the piccolo, which is a very small one, which can go up very high frequencies, very high notes. Then you have the brass instruments, okay, which are kind of, a bigger flute, if I may say so. But then they use pistons. They don't use holes in the instrument structure, but they use pistons that change the harmonics. Okay, but whoever learns to play brass instruments, this notion of harmonics is not new to them because they have to learn the harmonics to get the actual notes. For the other people, it's harmonics are what? It's the mathematical direction, like, ooh, maths. I hate them. But yeah, that works. I have to come back to the violin shortly because of the energy. So let me switch back a bit to here. As I speak a bit about the types of audio signals. So we've talked a bit about the sound source and how, where that sound source is coming, it affects the voice. For example, also, if you come to people, okay, if you come to people, and tall people tend to have a lower voice. Okay, so I'm 6'1", and I tend to be able to go quite low. Not as audible, okay, but when I was in the hypogeum, I managed to get quite a nice sound. I probably can make you hear that. The hypogeum, of course, has this auricle chamber which resonates at 40 hertz and at 75 hertz. I managed to go down to the 75 hertz, and I believe it's this one. Okay, that's the lowest and the loudest I've heard myself be at that. I mean, it's incredible. It's like an instrument, the auricle chamber, and it's just splendid. As opposed to, for example, if we let me get that now here. Yes, this is the other member of my house. That was myself, sorry. That was a willful intonation from my wife. Okay, the one on top I think is mine. I think she was trying to mimic my sound. Yes. And apart from the shouting, etc., from the loud parts, what I wanted to show was not just the spectrogram, because the spectrogram, oops. Okay, we got the spectrogram there. Let me, and I will share screen. Yes, I will do that better. Oh, sure. So bear with me. I'm going to share screen now. This one. Because I'm going to show you something different. Okay, so it's worth it. No worry. That's one. And that's two. So this one on top, that was my voice. Okay, and you can see I have like these three bright bands at the bottom, which kind of reflect a bit again in this 2.5 range. Okay, and then there was quite a few reds up to this 7K. Wow. Yeah, I sing in a choir, so I do have a bit of a projection. On the other hand, there's my wife, who has 1, 2, 3, and then the seventh one is quite strong. So 1, 2, 3, and then the seventh one. Okay. However, she was singing a higher note than myself. I will show it again for those who joined late. So she was singing at the 550 hertz. I was singing, yeah, I'll try the same, 500 hertz, somewhere there. But you also see I have this underlying tone here, 250, supporting that. whereas she does not. So in my case, because I have this underlying frequency here, 250, and this repeats itself. So if I zoom out, you can see that at 750, okay, it's also present. Whereas in the case of my wife, there's nothing at the 750. So her fundamental frequency here is this 500, and shows she has her harmonics at the 1000, 1500. Well, it's a bit offset, but every 500 hertz, basically, we get a harmonic. So they are quite spread out from each other. Whereas in my case, because I started from the 250, so I have a harmonic every 250. So my harmonics are a bit more dense than in her case. Now, what I wanted to show you differently is I want to take a slice, a cut out of the spectrogram. So I can do that. And basically, I will do plot spectrum. And plot spectrum, not enough data, so let me select a bit more. Okay, so plot spectrum gives us a cut through the spectrogram, removing time, so it's like a snapshot. And this time I have my frequencies on the bottom, okay, and the magnitude, so these bright spikes, showing along the y-axis. So according to this, Mela, where are we here? Yes, so I have the 250 hertz there, the 250 hertz, the peak at the 250 hertz, and then I have a bigger peak here in the 500 hertz. But then again, I have it in the 750 or thereabouts, and then the 1000, and then the 1250, whereabouts, 1550, 1750. Okay, you get all these peaks. Yes.
Just out of curiosity, is there a second screen to this? Because I'm still seeing this spectrogram.
Okay.
I
What
don't know if
happened
the-
is, okay, let me do some. Thank you for pointing that out, because I was showing Audacity in particular. Mela, did I cut you all off? No, you're still here. Okay.
I'm still here.
So now you're seeing what I was.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Now it's making much more sense. Thank you.
Oh, so this lower red peak here, that is this spike here, this 250 spike here. Then we have this bright yellow one, that's the 500, that's this much larger peak here. Then we have the 750, and then the next one at the 1000. Then we have these four lower peaks, which are these 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe even a 5. And then we get another few yellows. These are the spikes that we have further up here. So all these spikes are harmonics of this 250 that I have over here. Let me just take a screenshot of that so we can compare. So we can compare once we get my wife's. So that's me, and if we take the same one for my wife and compare that with this one, Mela, she doesn't have a big spike in the 250. Okay, there's this, yes, but it's very small compared to this spike that I have here. She has her first spike on the 500 something, and then the larger spike in the 1000. So while she was trying to play this 500, sing this 500, her harmonics, her voice, her timbre, okay, actually projects more than twice as much. You can imagine why you get a headache. And then the 1500, the 2000. So they are now harmonics of that 500. Issa, I am a bass. I am not a tenor. Okay, she's a soprano, so she is quite, how do you say, accustomed to singing up there. So her voice is quite trained, and she used to go for voice training. So she's quite well trained. That's why she has that high peak there. In my case, I don't really sing the 500 hertz. I cheat, okay? I sing the 250, but I project the 500 so it sounds like it's a 500. But my timbre, okay, is based on the 250, so I have more frequencies filling in, being the harmonics of that 250, not the 500 that I was supposed to actually sing. But that's how I, keep up with life. I sing in a choir with her. That's where I found her, in the choir. And to keep up with the majorly female members of the choir, I have to cheat my way. I sing an octave lower, but then my harmonics catch up with them. So yes, of course my wife is shorter than me, so usually shorter instruments like typical go higher pitch, longer instruments, taller instruments like myself go lower. So yeah, again I can copy this for you here. So that's male voice, basso, and then we have no, not the paint, femur, audacity, Eva, this one, there you go, and this would be the female soprano. And that is spectrum. So you have frequency on the x-axis, and you have magnitude. It's not amplitude, it's magnitude, power sort of, on the y-axis. Okay. Move. Issa, what kind of sounds do we actually work with? Do we actually use? And we're looking at three kinds of audio signals. We have periodic waveforms, we have noise, and we have performed sounds. Periodic waveforms are waveforms that repeat themselves in a regular manner. Okay, the most natural of them is the sine wave, but we also have other shapes like the ramp wave, the pulse wave, triangle wave, which still have a peak, a crest, and a trough, but the change from one to the other is not as smooth as if going around in a circle. Okay, triangle wave is literally a straight line going through, and the pulse wave is a binary. It's a 1 0 1 0. What changes is the timbre of the sound. So if you go back to Audacity, these were the instruments. So check. Let me just save them. Yes, I know. Desktop for now. Viva, because I'm in a hurry. Instruments. There. Now, if I close these and get a new one. Mela, if I generate the tone as a sine wave, let's go for the 220 again. Okay, that's as a sine wave. Then I want to generate another one. And this one I'm going to go for a square wave. Okay, then I'm going for another one. And I'm going for a sawtooth. Not on the same one, Yasra. Sorry. Generate tone. Sawtooth. Okay. If we zoom in, okay, we can see their shape difference. So I have the sine wave, we have the pulse wave, and we have the sawtooth or the ramp.
But they're the same frequency, yes? So it's just
the same frequency, yes, same frequency. If you do this, okay, you can see it can fit the same wavelength, and we're fitting in the same wavelength. Yes, same frequency, all of them 220. Now, let's listen to their timbre, okay, to their quality of sound. Nice, individually, please. Sorry. Solo, this is the sine wave, should be a pure sound. Okay. Okay. Now, let's hear the pulse wave. It sounds even brighter, okay? It has almost like a higher frequency to it. And the ramp wave. Why do you think they sound different? Okay, it's for the shape of the sound. But why do they sound higher almost? Okay, if you play this one, it's quite low. But if you go for this one,
progressive.
Okay, it's quite high. It's not progressive.
As in the sine wave is progressive, so you go through. No, but it's still the same frequency, eh?
Still the same frequency, yeah, still the same frequency.
I don't know.
Any other guesses? It has more wave space, less energy in the sine wave, has more wave space close to the middle point.
Less amplitude.
The amplitude are the same. No, they still reach. They're all 0.8. When I did generate tone, okay, the amplitude was all 0.8. I just changed the waveform. Brigitte is saying sort of it spends more time on the one in the pulse wave, okay, but maybe not on the sawtooth. Not on the sawtooth. On the sawtooth was even less. Was even less.
The cycles are different, as in. I don't know how to explain it. I'm missing some.
Yeah, there's a bit of a phase offset. Well, these two, they start from the bottom. This goes up, and this. But it shouldn't be a higher frequency in a way, right? Because the frequency is the same there. Mela, to explain that a bit, we have to look at additive synthesis square wave. Mela, basically, Eva, fifth, not really. Mela, look at this construction of the square wave. Okay, it looks like Batman or a molar being pulled, and it's getting progressively closer to a square wave. Basically, to create such a square wave, you can create it out of a sine wave, okay, by adding more harmonics to it. More harmonics to it. Basically, by adding odd harmonics. So you start from 1, and you add the 3rd, and the 5th, and the 7th, and the 9th, and the 11th. The more you add, okay, the closer it becomes to a proper pulse wave. Because of course, it's very hard to make this, okay? You're basically telling the speaker, move forward, stay there, come back, stay there, move forward. And to create a function which creates that, it's difficult to create a function to get that. But you can get close to it, okay, if you add the odd harmonics of a sound. So it sounds brighter because we are adding actually the odd harmonics. So we're going upwards in the frequencies being added onto it to create this kind of pulse wave. And likewise, the sawtooth additive synthesis. Okay, like this one, for example. I think it's this one here if we need. Yes. What was this one? Just give me the image then. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's adding all the harmonics with decreasing amplitudes. 1/2, 1/3, 1/4, 1/5, 1/6, 1/7, 1/8, 1/9, 1/10. So by adding all the harmonics with decreasing fraction, as in it's a fall of a decaying amplitude as harmonics go forward, will create this ramp wave. So again, we create the ramp wave by adding harmonics to it. That's why it sounds brighter. It sounds at a higher frequency because actually the higher frequencies are there composing, creating that particular sound.
Sir,
yes.
Is there a limit to it when you were showing the decreasing the decreasing increase? Let's not put it like that. Is there a limit to it? Because it looks like last year, if I'm not mistaken, we used to call them isotopes, which essentially they almost come to a zero but never come to a zero. So my question would be, is there a limit to them? Will there be a point where they will reach a zero in this case?
Probably it would be irrelevant to us because our hearing range is up to 20K.
Okay.
So they could reach a 0, but at a point beyond which we would not be able to detect it. O allura even the instruments, since we only hear to 20K, most instruments, we'll talk about them later, because there are ultrasonics up to 96, for example. But most instruments, like the speakers on your system, since they are devised for common mortals, okay, not for dogs, they would limit at 20K, so you'd still not be able to hear them.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
Welcome. So these are the periodic waveforms, okay? They are called periodic because they repeat the shape periodically over a particular time. There's, of course, another, and by the way, if we choose spectrogram, we, of course, expect to see only that particular sound, okay? If I, for the sine wave, if we look at the square wave, there you go, okay? That's all the harmonics needed to create that, and likewise for the ramp wave. And from the color, okay, you can see it's decaying value as the frequencies go up. Another sound that we can create is noise. Okay, it's noise, which is basically just noise, right? It's what you hear when you're out of range. and if we zoom in, okay, it's practically random amplitudes thrown here and there. And if we look at the spectrogram, it's basically a nice carpet to have in your living room. Yeah, all the frequencies are present at some point in time. We use noise to present percussion, right? Wind, and possibly surf. Surf as in waves crashing on the rocks. Maybe even rain. Okay, rain pattering on your window, for example. So noise, although it's not interesting frequency-wise, okay, it is interesting because it can be used to signal an event. Like percussion, it's not a note being played, la, but it's rather a hit. Okay, and of course, by parameterizing the range of that noise, we can have different percussion instruments like the drum set, which is basically a bunch of noise at different frequencies. All respect to any drummers out there, but very important for rhythm and also the use of the different noise parameters can be used to create an interesting pattern of rhythm. The third form of sound, performed sound, is what we started the lesson with. What is like the flute, like the violin. And this one has, because it's performed, has a certain physicality to it. Even the volume changes during the performance. It's called the envelope, not the one you put the letter in, okay? The envelope is the shape of the sound volume along time. And we describe that as the attack, decay, sustain, and release. Those are the four parts. And what you have there is the initial attack, the initial effort to make the sound, and then there's a sort of relaxation, that decay. Then there's the sustain, there's the keeping of the note, and then there's the release of the sound. That is when I wanted to make use of. Oh, sorry! Don't make so much noise. I still have them. Okay. Mela, the violin. I wanted this one, and I want to look at the waveform. Okay, look at the waveform, and particularly this part. That. You can sort of sense that initial strike here. See, almost there. And you can see this rise in volume, okay? Then it goes down, and then it keeps itself a bit, and then it goes off. What is that? So, if I have to go back to turn on the video, I will keep the screen. Hopefully I will not do so much damage to you. Yes, that's good. So you can look a bit at the video now, not at the screen share. I am showing you on the violin. So remember that when we're playing the violin, basically we have this bow that needs to cause friction against the string. Now, the first thing you have is inertia. Okay, there's this friction part that you have to start some effort to start the bow moving. That is the attack. That is the attack. But if you keep on going with the same strength, okay, you will run out of bow and you won't have time to play the note. So as soon as you start off that attack, you will relax a bit, you will slow down to have that sustain, to have that continuous note play. And then you pull up the bow, but the string still keeps vibrating a bit, okay? That would be the release. Let's do it again. That would be the release part. It's the string dampening itself until it stops vibrating. Now, that envelope is also part of the performance of the music. What do I mean? Voilà. If we go a bit here. If I want the composer, okay, who's writing the music, may actually want that attack and decay between two particular notes. So I'm going to make a second note by pressing on, can you see that? Okay, I'm going to press on the string to shorten the string and so change the note. Okay, so I have something like this. Okay, if I shorten it, it becomes shorter, and Lura, it creates a higher frequency. So watch this finger, I'm going to press it down in order to get a higher note. So, okay, Essa. If I want a attack and decay sound between them, I will want the musician to change direction of the bow. So down and then up. Changing bow direction will introduce an attack and a decay. So doing that for a different note will sound like this. But if I don't want that attack and decay, I will ask the two notes to be played on the same bow. Sorry. There's a smooth transition from one note to the next. Otherwise, I will tell them, no, you have to do them separately. To introduce that attack and decay at the beginning. And these are actual marks that musicians will have on their manuscript, telling them whether to play it on the same bow or to play it on a separate note, on a separate bow, in order to introduce this attack and decay. They don't tell them this. I mean, my son was learning this at school, okay, at music school. They don't teach them the envelope and the attack and decay, but they have to. When you say this, you have to play it like this. When you say this, you have to play it on the same bow. And they don't like that. If there's some physics behind it, it's something that you should know to be aware of what's going on, with the music. These are some envelope examples, okay, of different instruments. I showed you. Okay, so there's the plucked string. The plucked string would be just plucking the string, sorry. Okay, and the plucked string, I can turn off the camera, so here. So I can focus a bit on here. So on the plucked string, okay, there is no sustain. There's an attack, an immediate attack, because you're plucking it, a decay, and then a release. There's no sustain. The sustain would be here. This would be the wind instrument. Again, the wind instrument, like the flute, also has an attack. The attack of the I have to turn on the video again. Sorry, to explain this. The attack of the flute. Whoa. Attack of the clones, attack of the flute. The attack on the flute is the tonguing. Basically, you don't just blow, all right? You have to get a bit of pressure. So what you do is you block your lips with the tongue, and then literally spit, without the saliva, and you spit the air out. And that is the attack, okay? The attack on the flute. And basically, when you are blowing with your tongue between the lips, you're building pressure, okay? Which as soon as you pull your tongue back, that pressure is immediately released. That's the attack. But then you have to prolong the pressure with the blowing, and that's the sustain. So that would be the profile for the wind instrument. Let me just go back here. That's the profile for the wind instruments. It's the tonguing, the pressure coming out, the sustained blowing, and then the release as you stop blowing. There's the pipe organ. The pipe organ, which also has wind. It's a wind instrument, but it's not the person blowing through the pipe organ, but there's a compressor. Okay, there's an electric compressor blowing air constantly. So there's this again initial release, sustain, and then the decay. Electric organ doesn't work with wind, doesn't work with air. It's either off or it's on. So you get both and off. The drum, like the plucked string, is a single hit and then the release. And then depending on the kind of percussion, if it's a cymbal, okay, with the kind of sound, and then there's the kind of control over it. Sforzando is when you're doing it with extra pressure, so you have this sudden attack and a quick release. So these are all envelope examples of amplitude change over time, which also are part of your identification of the instrument. When we played the violin and the flute, and I asked you to determine between them, you are not only listening to the frequencies, to the harmonics, but you are also listening to the performance of itself, the performance of the instrument itself. In fact, one of you even heard my daughter getting some air to play the next one. Okay, and the last slide is a recap of how we have been visualizing sound so far. The first one is a long time, amplitude a long time. The second one is a snapshot of frequencies played at a particular point in time, with frequency at the bottom and amplitude on the side. The bottom one, the spectrogram, is it's frequency, a long time, and color used to denote the spikes that we get here. An interesting exercise you can do is to download a spectrogram app on your mobile, and listen to certain sounds around you. The first time I did it, I was next to a church, and bang on time, the church bells played. So I got, whoa, that was a nice baptism of fire for the app. Just look up spectrogram and try some of them, and see, you're whistling on it, or go next to someone singing, or you're using yourself, or get the dog barking or whatever. See how that is represented as a spectrogram. It's always interesting. Okay, so that was, I spent so much time on, 7 slides. But yes, I do think that getting these instruments and showing you what's going on, and Audacity is also a good tool to help understand the physicality, the physics of these sounds. Because now, for us to understand how we hear this, we need to be well aware of what's going on in the air around us. Okay. That takes us to some biology now. Some biology now with the human auditory system. It helps if you had biology. doesn't really matter if you did not. We need to look at the ear structure, how we localize sound, how we know where the sound is coming from, how we perceive frequency, how we perceive temporal structure, so music along time, and then we'll meet the twins, harmony and melody. Nice names to have for twins. Mela, let me check my setup right now. So I don't need the video, so you can focus, so we can dedicate the bandwidth totally to the screen share. Okay. Mela, the human oral system is not just the part that we can see, okay, the what we call the pinna, okay, the earlobe that's called the pinna, but is of course made up of three segments. There's the outer ear, the middle ear, and the inner ear. These two spirals here are not your eyes, okay? They're behind your eye, but no, not directly behind your eye. In the diagram, they are positioned behind the eye, but really they are quite behind your ear, literally. And those two snail-looking shapes, those are then connected to the brain. So it's the brain then that is listening in to what's coming. So because we have two ears, we have the feature of binaural hearing, as do most animals. It is made up of two parts, okay? The sense and the cognition. The sense is the sensation of sound, which is carried out by the external middle and inner ear. And then there's the cognition, the brain function, okay? The brain which is interpreting, understanding the information being sent in by the ear. And it is a combination of two, okay? The element of hearing, but also what we're hearing is not only the sound coming from the sound source, not only the frequency and the harmonics, but also the acoustics of the room, okay? The acoustics of the room. So the echoes, the reverberations, some sounds are muffled because we are enough behind the screen. So psychoacoustics is how the brain is understanding all this information and through it, in a way, visualizing the environment, okay? Locating where the sound is, what are other sources around him, whether he's close to a wall or he's outside in open air. All of these are information that accompany the sound that we are receiving. Here we are zooming in on one side, okay? This was binaural, considering both ears. Now we'll focus on one ear. And we'll cut it up into three pieces: the outer ear, the middle ear, and the inner ear. The outer ear is the visible part, okay? It's the pinna, it's the earlobe, which basically allows us to funnel in, to capture our satellite dish, to funnel in the sounds into the auditory canal, the one which is all waxy and full of stuff, and then the sounds reach the sheltered tympanic membrane, okay, the eardrum, tympanic membrane, the eardrum, which basically is sensitive to vibrations, okay? It is receiving the vibrations coming in from the ear. As I mentioned earlier, the auditory canal is resonating between 3000 and 4000 hertz, which is why feast flares hurt so much, but also it is the frequency used by alarms. Okay, if I have an alarm, I want to attract your attention as much as possible. So I will use your built-in amplifier, your ear canal, and I will use frequencies in the range of 3 to 4 kilohertz, so that your ear will amplify my sound and hear it more. Okay, if you want to catch someone's attention, you use frequency between the 3 and 4K. Then we have the middle ear. The middle ear is what's behind the eardrum, and that is the three smallest bones in the body: the malleus or the hammer, the incus, the anvil, and the stirrup, which is this fork-looking part here. It's interesting what's happening here. What is incoming is vibrations in the air. Okay, vibrations in the air. These vibrations are converted into a mechanical movement because basically this vibrating eardrum, the hammer is connected to it and it will move back and forth according to the movement of the eardrum, and this part here is a pivot and causes the incus to move back and forth as a result. And there is amplification because the incus is longer than the hammer. So the ratio between the length of the incus and the length of the hammer is the amplification we get of the sound that we are listening to. What the incus does by moving back and forth is to move back and forth the stirrup. So we have the stirrup which is moving back and forth in an amplified amplitude, amplified intensity than being received by the eardrum. So the weld out there is actually quieter than it sounds. It's our ears which amplify it. What is that stirrup doing? That stirrup is pulling back and forth this elliptical area of this squid-like shape, squid-like organ, which has the nice name of a cochlea or cochlea. I don't know, probably it's a cochlea, whatever, which looks like a snail. Okay, over here has this curled up part, and on the other side it has these three, what do you call them? I don't know. Those are responsible for balance. Okay, one is horizontal, one is vertical, and one is diagonal. When you lose your balance, it's because these guys, the liquid in these guys has moved too much. But we're interested more in this lower part here. Now, this is not a party whistle. Okay, it's not one of those that when you blow it, it opens up. Okay, it remains like this. If both opened up, you could look through your ear to the other side. No, you can't. So this is all curled up. It's called the cochlea, and it has an auditory nerve connected to it that goes back to the brain. That is what is sending information to our brain. So vibrations delivered mechanically by the stirrup, okay, then cause the liquid inside this organ to vibrate accordingly. So we have another conversion here from mechanical to hydraulic. We have here hydraulic vibration. Issa, these vibrations are delivered inside the cochlea to what is called the basilar membrane, which has a lot of cilia, a lot of hairs, which are excited by the movements of the air. Let's look a bit deeper into that. We're coming. I want to do it now. Let's do it now. So we're looking here, okay, inside this curly stuff here. It's the basilar membrane, okay, and there's a cochlear duct between them. And basically the cilia, the hairs along this basilar membrane, are sensitive to different frequencies. The hairs at the opening of the cochlea are sensitive to the higher frequencies, 20 kilohertz or maximum, okay, 7,000, 5,000, and as we go in through the basilar membrane, okay, we start sensing the lower frequencies. 200 hertz, lowest is 50 hertz. This explains two aspects of hearing. Okay, by the way, here on this side, you can see that the higher frequencies are sensed at the beginning, okay? The lower frequencies, medium frequencies rather, are sensed in the middle, and the lower frequencies are sensed inside. Mela, two aspects of hearing. Why couldn't you hear my low frequency sounds? Okay, low. Whereas the high frequency pitch are very loud, okay? Because the effort needed to reach the cilia sensitive to high frequencies is much less, okay, they're immediate, is much less than the effort needed to reach inside and reach those lower frequencies. So we need more power, more amplitude to the lower frequencies to reach deep down into the cochlea and excite the relevant cilia. Okay, so that is why lower frequencies sound of a lower volume. It could be that they have the same volume physically at source, but perceptually, okay, lower frequencies are sounded less. So when you choose to play a lower frequency instrument, you have to increase its amplitude or lower the amplitude of the higher frequencies. The second aspect of hearing is what happens when we grow older. As we grow older, we lose sensitivity to the higher frequencies. Because being on the outside, not sheltered like the lower frequency cilia, the higher frequency cilia get worn out much earlier. So the high frequency difference between S for serpent, okay, and the F of flower, okay, we start to not be able to detect that. Because between is a higher pitch frequency that with time we cannot hear. In fact, I had a student who confirmed this, not due to hearing, pero because of the phone line. Okay, the phone line having a limit on the frequencies it can play. They couldn't get his name right. Okay, his name was Cedric with a C, Cedric, and they kept calling him Frederick. And he's like, it's not Cedric. Sorry, it's not Frederick. It's Cedric. Yes, Frederick. No. And as we grow older, Allura, we start losing these higher frequency sounds, and we are unable to detect, understand words because certain frequencies, even between U and E, okay, U and E is basically a U with a higher frequency. So if you cut off that higher frequency, it starts to sound like a U. And so our perception of sound changes.
Yes. I have a question about this.
Mhm.
So let's about low frequencies. For example, they're harder to hear.
Yes.
So when someone increases the volume of something outputting a low frequency, is it essentially being played at a higher frequency then, or how does that work?
Okay, so volume depends on amplitude. So it is the motion of the molecules away from rest that gets increased, not how often that happens. Okay, frequency is how often the movement is carried out. Volume is how far away from rest are the molecules being moved. So it is the amplitude that's changing. So loudness depends on amplitude. Frequency depends on wavelength.
All right. Because if it changed the frequency, I would guess it would sound at a higher pitch, sort of.
Echo. That's right.
All right.
It's something else to since you're mentioning low frequencies, is that low frequencies also travel through the body. Okay, travel through the jawbone, to the cranium, through our bodies themselves. So when you hear yourself on a recording, for example, okay, you do hear yourself differently because on the recording, the low frequencies are not as well captured as when you hear your voice through your bones. Okay, and of course the bone is, I mean, it's not hollow. Okay, it's solid, so it cannot vibrate fast enough to deliver the high frequencies, but the low frequencies do pass through the bone material. It's like when you're underwater. Okay, when you're underwater, you can't hear the high frequencies because the water molecules are too heavy to move fast enough to deliver the high frequencies. But the low frequencies, like for example a speedboat motor, okay, if you're snorkeling and you hear a speedboat motor, you would think it's right upon you. Okay, and you panic and you look up and it's halfway across the bay. but it's because our our sensing of low frequencies in normal air, okay, that kind of volume would be expected from a source which is very close to you. But because underwater low frequencies are carried forward without losing power, because there's less space between the molecules, then it is still loud by the time it reaches you, that you think it is literally quite upon you. It is quite upon you. So when you are speaking, the lower frequencies that you emit are you hear them more than people outside your body, than the rest of the people. So when you hear my low voice, to me it actually sounds lower because I can hear it through my bones. And then the funny part, we had a student, a full-time student, and he had a really shrilly voice. He had a really high-pitched voice. And unfortunately, his classmates used to make fun of him about it, not to his face. But for example, I was next to a student and he said something, and I told him, I'm coming soon, and I called by name. And the guy told me, and you realize it was him. I'm like, come on. I mean, then, where the class broke laughing was when I asked them to record themselves, okay, and to use it in an example like this one. And the first thing is, how different I sound. And the others were laughing. Tipo, that's what we hear all the time, man. But I took that occasion to explain it. Okay, yes, because you hear your own low frequencies, which we don't. We hear you at a much higher frequency than you do. It was like, okay, so that's why you're all laughing when I speak. It's
All right, interesting.
something else relevant, okay, is this Wooger vest. I don't know if any of you have come across it. Um, it's a vest mostly useful for VR. So Brigitte, don't. It's your responsibility. I'm not causing you to buy it. Basically, it's a vest with big speakers on it. So yes, so you end up hearing with your body, not just your ears. And basically, that's being used to transmit low frequency sounds to your body as if you would hear them if you were there. Because when you're listening just through headphones, you're only using your ears to listen to the sound. But when you wear vests like these, who have speakers on them to convey the vibrations to your body, you can also feel physically the vibrations of the low frequency sounds that are very prominent when you have, say, explosions. Okay, so games that involve shooting and all that, and explosions, you are more immersed because your whole body, your torso at least, is feeling all these vibrations. Or at a concert, for example. Okay, you do get VR experience at a concert. Um, yeah, they cost quite a bunch of money. I think about 300 to 500. But there's also the strap. Okay, which is I think a single speaker that you can put over your torso, your chest, and you can feel at least a few of these vibrations. This is the portable one. It's the cheaper one. But yeah, this looks a bit more, feels a bit more. Uh, no, it wasn't $11,000. No, it wasn't that much. It wasn't that much. Um, I leave it up to you to get the shock about that. It's a nice. I mean, for an audio person like me, I mean, to get this kind of add-on to VR, it's something that, yeah, it's in my wish list. Christmas already passed. Oh, I lost an occasion there. Okay, 47.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, Mala. Okay, for there a bit tough time on this one. How we localize sound, how we realize where the sound is coming from, where sound is coming from. If you are sleeping and you hear a fly in the room, okay, and the fly comes next to you, you have a better chance of catching that fly in the darkness, okay, than you have a mosquito. Because the fly's frequency of flapping is at a lower frequency than the mosquito. The mosquito has that high-pitched sound, whereas the fly has a lower one. We are better able to locate low-frequency sounds because, let's use MS Paint for that. So let's say this is you, okay, and these are your ears, okay. And if I have a low-frequency sound, it means it has a longer wavelength. So we have something something like this. Basically, we are able to detect the difference in phase between the two sounds. When a sound reaches one ear and then reaches the other ear, we are able to detect at which stage of the wave we are sensing it. Okay, because it's long enough for us to detect the difference. It's called interaural time difference. Okay, we're able to detect a time difference in the wave between one ear and the next. That's with low frequency sounds. We can do that. With high frequency sounds, okay, where the wavelength is very small, okay, no, we're not able to detect at which stage we heard the wave with our left ear and with the right ear. So we can't use interaural time difference for high frequencies. What we can do, okay, because sound diminishes in amplitude with time, okay, the farther away you are, the less loud I can hear you. So if I have a mosquito here, all right, let's use a blue for this one. If I have a mosquito here, okay, the closer ear is going to have a higher amplitude than the ear farther away, which will have a lower intensity. So in that case, for high frequencies, we use interaural intensity difference. Essa. Interaural, it means inter means between, okay, aural ears, so between the ears. So the difference between the ears, we base ourselves on time and intensity. For low frequencies, we use both of them. But for high frequencies, we can only use intensity as our detection. Okay, how loud is it between one and the other? In fact, when I used to go into the server room in the old building in St. Martin's, where it had quite a few servers, and there was a beeping server, I couldn't find out which one was it. Okay, so I used to close one ear, use the other one, and use it like an eye to try and detect from where the louder sound is coming from, to try and detect which server is actually beeping so high. Issa, when you have headphones, of course, you can't move your head to identify the location. So when you have headphones, again, we use the difference between amplitudes of the two speakers, the left and right speaker, to help project, to help create the illusion of 3D sound, okay, of location of sound around you. That is between left and right. Between left and right. How do we detect between front and back? How do we detect between front and back? If a sound is coming from behind you or a sound is coming from the front. What is different from the front and back that allows us to detect if a sound is coming from the front or from the back?
I think if it's coming from the front, you would be able to compare it with what you see, sort of. And if that sound, for example, sounds like a car, perhaps you would, and you're able to see the car at least.
Contextual information, sort of. But what if you close your eyes, so you can't use vision, and you're clicking in front of you and behind you, not yourself, someone else and someone. No, you should still be able to detect. I need the camera for this.
I guess our ears aren't like flat with our heads, we sort of have that slight angle, so like instinctively you sort of turn your head automatically.
Maybe it's because of the shape of the outer ear. The pinna, it affects. I don't know.
Well, I don't know. I don't know your cultures, but when my kids were born, my wife and her mother put sticks on their ears so that the ears are, not jutting out, but as flat as possible, as aesthetically as flat as possible. So, is that diminishing our ability to detect from the front and from the back? There is something which helps. There's something which is not at the back, but is at the front, which is helping, and that's your nose. Okay, if you notice, your nose is on the same level as the ears, okay, and so sound just coming from the front gets kind of turbulence as a result of the nose, which doesn't get from the back. So it's not just because of the nose, okay? Yes, the pinna also have a factor, but a factor in this as well is the presence of the actual nose. In fact, Voldemort, you could actually sneak up from behind him because he wouldn't know if you're in front or on the back, since he had no nose. Uh, apart from the Voldemort joke, okay? Yes, the nose plays part in that too. Okay. Well, I have four slides. Let me start from this one. Okay. In music, the difference between harmony and melody is both of them are groups of notes, but in the case of a melody, the group of notes are in sequence. La 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 la. Okay, that's a melody, notes after each other. A harmony is when you have multiple notes playing together. So when we had those instruments playing together there, okay, that was a harmony because you had two notes being played together. We can make them three if I sing with them, but I will not. Okay. So harmony is frequency of note and harmonics due to the timbre, multiple instruments playing together. Um, Issa, they are said to be in harmony if the notes are consonant, if the notes are integer multiples of each other. But you could have dissonant notes, which are used for effect. Okay, when you have someone who slightly goes off key and then goes down to the proper key. Sometimes in music they do use um, dissonance in order to create a particular feeling in the music, and then it resolves to something nice. Issa. So there's melody long time and harmony played together. When we are playing an instrument like a piano, particularly a piano, we did mention that harmonics are integer multiple of base frequency. Okay, so you're playing a frequency, and the integer multiples are part of the timbre, part of the voice of it. And we said now that harmony is using notes that are harmonics of the tonic note. And timbre is the collection of these harmonics when played by the instrument. Mela, when you have music and you have a piano, for example, here, within an octave, now what is an octave? An octave is the repetition of the same note. So we have A, B, C, D, E, F, G. That is one octave. We then start again from A, B, C, D, E, F, G. That's another octave, where the frequency of this A, okay, is double the frequency of the previous A. So, if I hope you're seeing this clearly, here I have that A4 is 440. So this A has a frequency of 440. The next A has a frequency of 880. Okay, it's twice as much. The notes in between are part of the octave of this first A. In fact, if you look at the front, we see a number after the note. So there's C4, D4, F4. That 4 is the octave number. So from C4 to B4, that's octave 4. From C5 to B5, that's octave 5. Issa, within an octave, so from C to the next C, for example, we have 12 notes. We have 12 frequencies that we can play on a piano. The 7 white ones and the 5 black ones. 12, which are 7 and 5. However, when a pianist is playing, they don't use all 12 notes normally. They don't use all 12 notes. They would use only a subset of those 12, that subset that are in harmony with each other, that they sound nice together. Issa, to determine which ones sound nice, we use harmonics. If you look here on the side, on the right-hand side, our base frequency, our fundamental frequency, is this middle C here. It's C4, which is a frequency of 261.63. We already said that twice the frequency is the next octave, is the next C, which is C5. 3 times the frequency is the G, is this G here. If you 261 times 3, you get somewhere close to that 780.99. The 4th one is twice 2, so twice the twice. So yes, it's another C, it's C6. The 5th one is E. The 6th one is twice the 3rd. So again, it's another G. Then we have the 7th one, which is the B flat, which is this black note here, this B flat here. The 8th one is twice, 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 2 times 2 times 2, so it's another C. The 9th one is the D. The 10th is twice the 5th, so it's another E. 11, that's an F. 12th, that's a G. 13 is an A. 14 is the B flat. 15 is the B. And again, 16 is twice, 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 it's another C. Essa, look at the top ones, okay, from 8 up to 16. We have the white keys. We have C, D, E, F, G, A, B flat, B, and C. The white keys are all harmonics of C. So when a musician is told to play in the key of C, what we're telling them is, play those notes whose frequencies are harmonics of C. That's not what they learn. They learn them by heart. They learn that in the key of C, you have to play C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. They learn that in the key of G, you have to play C, D, E, F sharp, so not the F, but this one, and G. They learn them by heart. But numerically, there is an actual structure behind them. They sound nice when C is the core note, because they are harmonics of that C. Imma that B flat hemmhekk was that B flat. Yes, I had a student who used to teach guitar. Okay, so he was well learned in music. And on this slide, he had told me, so that's why there's the B flat. Okay, now it makes sense. The B flat is used when you have a chord. A chord is when you play 3 notes together or 4 notes. When you play the chord of C, okay, you play a C, a G, an E, and a B flat. Okay, and if you realize C, G, and E are the stronger harmonics for C. Okay, they are the ones which are closer to the strong first fundamental frequency. C, E, G, and the B flat, because the B flat is up here after the G. See it? It's also a strong one. It's also a strong one. It's not in the key, but when you're playing the the chord, sort of the four note chord for C, the B flat comes up. I am not asking you to remember this, all right? But to understand at least that in music theory and in music performance, the role of harmonics is not just the timbre of the voice, but also an important part of harmony, an important part of which sounds, which notes sound nice with another sound. The last two that I have, I'm running a bit over. If you are in no, you have to go. Don't worry, do go. But I wanted to mention two things. When you have a dissonance, two notes that sound bad together, okay, it is because when you have in your cochlea, your cilia are sensitive to a frequency, they are very happy when there is only one frequency attracting their attention. If two frequencies are too close to each other, the overlap region between them, the cilia that are here, don't know whether they should dance to this frequency or dance to this other frequency, so they are confused. And that causes the sound to sound bad, because they are not happily dancing to one sound. They have to sort of decide who's going to attract my attention. Okay, that is called dissonance, when you have an overlap of two tones causing an unpleasant sensation, which for us would be interesting if we want to convey tension. Isma, there's a murder going on. Isma, there's a horror around the corner. We don't want to sound it nice. We want to sound not nice. So we introduce dissonance for this. The last slide I have is about temporal structure. Sound, as we've seen, is an experience through time. You have to look at amplitude change over time. Patterns are also perceived across time. And music, that's what it is. Music is patterns in sounds. Patterns in sounds. We have a melody, which is a sequence of pitched notes, tan tan ta tan 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 ta tan tan, and when there's a pattern, it even becomes nicer. Okay, and then there's also a rhythm which comes along through the pattern of either pitched or non-pitched notes. That's why I mentioned percussion instruments before. Percussion instruments help us to keep the rhythm. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Even when we speak, we do have our rhythm. Okay? Merrily we roll along, roll along, roll along. Those notations there, the black ones, the filled pipes, are played faster than the empty ones, than the minims, than the empty pipes. So when you speak merrily we roll along, so merrily we roll A are all the same duration, but long is longer. Merrily we roll along, roll along, roll along, merrily we roll along over the deep blue sea. That kind of rhythmic pattern is also another important part of music. And when we do choose music to fit our moods, we want to choose music where the rhythm also fits the rhythm of what we are conveying. So if there is a slow scene, a very tranquil scene, you don't use fast music, okay? But use. But when there is action, okay, dun, 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 what's going on? You have to match the rhythm of the music with the rhythm of the action that is going on screen. Right. So in this half an hour, we went a bit over the ear structure, okay, and how we perceive frequencies. We've also uncovered a few mysteries about how we don't perceive frequencies. We understood a bit the harmony aspect of music by looking at how harmonics are used to determine which notes sound nice together. Why we don't like certain sounds who are too close, because this cilia don't know which one to react to, and also the importance of rhythm within a melody, within a piece of music. Harmony and melody the sequence of notes is the melody. When played together, that is the harmony. Again, I remind you, you do have course notes for this, so I invite you to revise a bit this section as well. In a couple of weeks' time, we will start looking now not at sound itself or how we hear it, but the devices we use in between. Okay, how we're going to record, we're going to play them back, how we're going to modify the sound going forward. So we started from the source. We also looked at the destination. Now we have to consider what's going on between the two. Sorry for going a bit over time. I hope at least it was interesting to some part. A bit of, brought in some instruments. I always like to make it more tangible. Audacity helps as well. Thank you for your attention. I hope it was enjoyable. And if you do have any questions, again, if maybe time now is not the time, I'm always ready for them at the next lesson, or if you want before, or always on Discord.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, sir.
Interesting. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Sam.
You're very welcome.
Bye.
Thanks.
You're
Good
welcome.
evening.
Good evening.
Thank you. Good evening yourself.
Thank you. Good evening, sir.
Welcome. I just mark Kevin because I did not mark him, and I think I also had Jamie.
Yes, sir. Thanks. Sorry.
It's okay, Kevin.
I got stuck in traffic from work.
I don't envy you. I don't envy you.
All right, sir. Thanks. Good night.
Take care. Take care. Bye.